Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Burgess. I'm the head of exhibitions and public programs at Cambridge University Library. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this event, which is part of our series for our current exhibition, Endless Stories, Manuscripts, Knowledge and Translation in the 17th Century. We're joined by Dr. Majid Daneshgar, who is Associate Professor in the Centre for Southeast Asian Studies at Kyoto University. So I'm in Cambridge and Majid is in Japan at the moment. Majid was a Mumby Fellow here in 2022 and 2023 and curated the beautiful exhibition, which is currently on display here in Cambridge. Majid's latest book is a catalogue of the Erpenius collection, which I'm sure we'll hear more about in his upcoming talk. And the title of the catalogue is Reconstructing Erpenius's Library and is due for publication by Brill in December 2024 this year. Majid's going to talk to us on Erpenius's Library, The Excellence of a Dutch Arabist. And so without further ado, Majid, thank you very much for joining us, and it'd be great to hear what you've got to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm really pleased and honored to be here and talk about Erpenius's library. And I'm honored that I got a chance to become the curator of this exhibition when I was part of a great and professional team at Cambridge University Library, including Chris, Bruce, Francisca, and many others who helped me generously and shared their knowledge throughout the process of making and curating this exhibition. 400 years ago, Erpenius, in 1624, November 1624, he died. So exactly 400 years ago, and we're gonna talk about him through these four centuries. And I hope that it meets the expectation of historians and other scholars of the field who are interested in not only in the story of books, but also the story of the East, Orientalist studies, Orientalism, philology, geography, and you would see that to what extent Erpenius's manuscripts are related to the various type of disciplines and academic fields. So who's Erpenius? So for sure, he was from a wealthy upper class family, and I think this is very essential to know about this issue. Thomas von Erpe, or widely known as Thomas Erpenius, was born in 1584. Parents were Johann von Erpe, and the mother was Beatrix. The father was a merchant, and they had a very good academic situation in the Netherlands at that time. He was born in the city of Gorinchem or Gorkum in the Netherlands, and he had a sister whose name, and very few people know about this issue, but he had a sister, the name was Mariam, who used to live with an so-called esteemed Belgian husband in London. According to the sources, it was a well-esteemed person attached to noble families. And also he married to Jacoba Boyes, daughter of a Dutch senator and chancellor in 1616. Throughout his life, it was from the beginning connected to politicians, chancellors, ambassadors. He was well connected with royal families. He really was not necessarily interested in or passion for going to a scholarly field from the beginning. Everything was provided for him. For sure, there were some challenges for him and his family from the beginning, but because of their religion. But in terms of, social class and even his connection with the people, with influential people, there was not really necessary for him to get connected or go to universities, but he was a seeker of knowledge. And I think this is the thing that make our case different, because former scholars before him, many of them were more or less connected to academicians and scholarly words, but Erpenius coming from a wealthy family connected with royal and politician and ambassador moving towards that, towards academia would be remarkable and important for this study. So Gorinchem and then Leiden is the journey. I remember the years I lived in the Netherlands, so the region of Zoetermeer, and I remember I visited Gouda, or Gouda, famous because of its cheese, and also, Gouda, and also the region near Gorinchem and Leiden. I wanted to get this feeling and the spirit of his passion to move to Leiden a few months before beginning my journey in Cambridge. So I decided to live in that region. I was also a scholar at Leiden University Library, cycling around the cities and feeling the way Erpenius has, changed his place and passion and moved to Leiden. And it was essential. The Leiden was the opening of his journey, academic journey. So Erpenius's academic life, according to my investigation, can be divided into three categories. First, the first phase or part is seeking knowledge from 1602 to 1608. The second phase would be acquiring knowledge and materials. And the third would be initiating in a formal Orientalism, which I called it organic Orientalism. The first phase, Erpenius's academic life's first phase, is about the way he became interested in academia, and he joined a great atmosphere already prepared in Leiden. Leiden was famous because of the activity of great scholars, including Joseph Scaliger. So Joseph Scaliger, already famous because of his works on calendars or tawarikh, taqwim, calendars, different types of chronology. Also famous because of his knowledge of different sort of languages, and many people praise him because of his ability to read different languages from east to west. Apart from Scaliger, there were Raphallenius, a very important scholar of Hebraist and also familiar with different sorts of languages, but he was good in Arabic and Hebrew. This is what we are sure about. So at that time, Erpenius decided to go to Leiden. In 1602, the context is already prepared. People know languages. It should be noted that nobody there was available to teach Arabic during the time he visited Leiden, and he studied in Leiden. Because of that, he never became an Arabist while he was a student there, but he was good in Hebrew. So he finally, in summer of 1608, he finished his study, okay? And he achieved or obtained his Master of Liberal Arts. So as an Hebraist, not an Arabist, he's interested to expand his domain of knowledge. He received a recommendation letter from Scaliger, this very person. Scaliger gave him a recommendation by which he visited United Kingdom, Oxford and Cambridge, where he stayed and studied. With whom? With William Bedwell, a mathematician, historian, and fellow of Trinity College of Cambridge, who died in 1632. If you go through the manuscript, the early catalogs or handlers of the Cambridge University Library, prepared a few years after the Erpenius manuscript were given to the library, you can see that the people or the guy, Jonathan Pinda, who cataloged or prepared the handlers of Erpenius's manuscript, introduced Bedwell as the instructor of Erpenius. So some people disagree, but whether we want it or not, he was influential. He was instrumental in introducing the Arabic world, or the Arab world and Arabic materials, to Thomas Erpenius. But Thomas Erpenius, after a couple of months, decided to move and change his direction. And this is the second phase of his life, academic life, acquiring knowledge and materials. So he moved to France. Why? Plenty of greatest scholars of Arabic studies or Arabic language. The famous Arabist of his time used to live there. The first is Hubert, medical doctor, physician of the court of Henry IV, also familiar with very well or fully familiar with what was going on in North Africa. He knew and he collected some materials in Arabic about medicine. Further, he was Isaac Kazabon, great librarian, scholar of Greek language, also fully familiar with different sort of Oriental languages. So these were the people already there. So Thomas Erpenius moved there. And this is interesting because some of the manuscripts of Erpenius, which are kept in Cambridge now, belong to these two people or scholars. Apart from these two, European scholars, Ahmed ibn Qasim al-Hijri, a Spanish Muslim or Morisco, was a good friend of Erpenius while he was in Paris. And he was introduced by Hubert to Erpenius, and they had contact together. And then, for example, the manuscript MM623 of the Cambridge University Library is one of the sources in which Erpenius clearly mentioned that I studied this text along with my friend Ahmed ibn Qasim al-Hijri. So it seems that they studied Arabic language and grammar together. And then Yusuf ibn Abu Daqan, or Abu Daknus, an Egyptian Copt. This guy also taught Erpenius. Portions of a time, a lecture of Arabic studies or Arabic language in Oxford, but once he wanted to develop his knowledge, he referred to Erpenius's works later on. So it shows that Erpenius had a good progress from as a beginner, became an advanced scholar of Arabic. So his life in Paris was very interesting, was so excited, acquired a good number of manuscripts during the time, a copy of the Quran, some book on medicine, some books on Arabic grammar. He collected, and all these manuscripts are parts of his baggage. So he decided to move and develop his knowledge. Moved to Venice. There, he stayed some time in order to find a ship to move towards Istanbul, Ottoman Istanbul. Unfortunately, he couldn't do that. Apparently, very sad, he decided to return. But before he left Venice, he had a chance and stayed in Venice and studied with a number of people having Jewish background, or even perhaps some of his Hebrew manuscripts, which were copied in Europe, were collected when he was in Venice. Also, he had a chance to learn and practice other languages, including Persian and Turkish. Some of his manuscripts, including some anthology of poems in Persian, in Ottoman Turkish, were collected and were given to him in Venice. In 1611, he decided to return, but through important cities of Milan, Basel, Geneva, and Heidelberg. So Geneva and Basel of Switzerland, but Milan. So these three cities of Milan, Basel, and Geneva were the cities that he collected early printed volumes. Most of them were later, after his death, sent for auction. But one of the most important places that he visited was Heidelberg, Palatina Library. So in that library, he started to scribe and transcribe and copy Arabic works, which he wanted and he aimed for producing. After July 1612, he arrived in Leiden, home university. There was already a scholar, teacher of Arabic. But he was an influential scholar. He was connected to Hubert and Casabon. He had a good reputation. He traveled a lot. He knew different manuscripts. He knew how European early printed volumes can contribute to their academic knowledge. So he was offered a good position, and he became the chair of Arabic studies in Leiden in February 1613. Before that, even in the late 16th century, there were people who taught Arabic in Leiden, but giving, giving a voice to Arabic language, finding it as an independent academic discipline, happened by appointing Erpenius as the chair of Arabic studies in Leiden. During this period, Erpenius acquired and produced theoretical knowledge and also practiced languages from 1613 to 1620, 4 years before his death. The background, if you see the picture, the image of the background, so it says that Erpenius was a professor of Arabic and Oriental languages in Leiden. So this book was published in 1614 when he only had a couple of works. But it was the beginning of his journey. He started studying former works by his predecessors, by a former generation of scholars, went through their works, revised them, reproduced them, published them. In the meantime, he collected further manuscripts. Some were given to him by merchants, by scholars, and later on, he became much more interested in practice these languages, and we will see, and I'll talk about them in next slides. So this is the second phase of his life, but I want to stay in this phase of his life and talk further about the manuscript that he collected. Erpenius's manuscripts from 1609 to 1620. 1609 to 1620 are crucial moments for him that he collected the manuscripts. Escaliga, perhaps we can call his mentor, Escaliga as his mentor, died in 69. We know that some of his manuscripts were in the possession of Erpenius. And these manuscripts, all a source of knowledge, a mine of information, multi-layered significance one can come across. And what you see the picture, an image, you can see I divided the manuscript when I was in Cambridge according to the cover they had. This is only the cover of the manuscript. Each of them has a specific story, The first row, the left side, rather original or primary covers or bindings when they arrive in Cambridge. The second and the third row, different types of bindings. And more importantly, once you open the story of every single folio and paper and pages are important. Okay. We have rare global materials. The first one are in Arabic manuscript. Once go and visit this collection, they come across Arabic manuscript, royal copies, Persianate commentaries on different texts, Chinese, Coptic, Turkish, belong to some kings and rulers from the Ottoman Turkey. Turkic from India. It is very rare, and I'll talk about it later. Malay, Javanese, in different scripts. Hebrew, also Yiddish, which was common in Europe, and Aramaic, Syriac, Telugu of southern India, and Latin, Dutch, Greek. All of them are important materials, and don't forget, all these were prepared in the early 17th century. It's still European colonialism is in its infancy, and people are really interested in knowledge and language. So the second type are unique sources from Southeast Asia with different qualities, languages, scripts, and papers. I will talk about them further, but this is very interesting that the type of paper used in Malay-Indonesian manuscripts and South Asian languages, we have poly materials, which is a Telugu text. We have normal paper Telugu text, which is very uncommon for that time. Most of Telugu texts at that time were copied on palm leaves, but having a European paper, very unique, sort of unique. We have Malay-Indonesian material that we do not have any further copies in the world, and I will explain the reason in the next slides. Scripts and different types of dialects one come across. The manuscript from Aceh, Sumatra, the way they pronounce and the way they show the different pronunciation of terms and letters are quite interesting and different from current versions of Malay-Indonesia languages. And the papers, some papers are normal European papers, Oriental papers, or if we don't know, some of Oriental manuscripts, some Malay manuscripts have contain Oriental papers that we do not have any idea about their origin, but some of them were copied on the Luang or bark tree paper from Indonesia. So these are the things telling us more information about a big gap. They fill a huge gap in the literature about what was going on in Southeast Asia during the formative period of Islam. So manuscripts belong to Erpenius, are one of the main sources telling us about those times. Earliest evidence demonstrating the development of Orientalist studies as a scholarly trend in Europe. The manuscripts of Erpenius, apart from that they include rare manuscripts and unique manuscripts, they also provide us with the earliest evidence demonstrating about the development of Orientalist studies. At that time, Arabic Europe, or Sicily, Emirate, we have very few information about. Of course, there were sources copied in Arabic, but to what extent does scholars pay attention to? We have among his manuscript important copy on the history of Muslim Sicily, studying Persian prose and poetry alongside each other. For a long time, whoever wanted to study Arabic, Persian, Turkish, they refer to Arabic dictionary, or they refer to their dictionaries. Arabic dictionary, Persian dictionary, Turkish dictionary. But Erpenius moved beyond this issue. He was in the possession of the Gulistan, or the Rose Garden of Saadi. We know that after the mid-17th century, scholars from the West paid particular attention to the works of Saadi of Shiraz. But before that, quite rare, and Erpenius was one of those who collected, and he studied these texts. And also poetry. And once he wanted to read prose, he also studied poetry. He has a good anthology of poems. Some part of them were copied in Karbala in Iraq, and some of them were copied in Central Asia. But they were bound together from the beginning, and they studied them along with each other, or alongside each other. Turkish historical accounts too. I will explain further, but before him, Turkish or historical accounts, very few people paid attention to. Most people, again, as I said, work on Turkish grammar, Turkish vocabulary, dictionaries. But shedding light on Turkish historical materials or historical accounts in the Turkish language is quite rare. And Turkic manuscripts, I think he was one of the first scholars in the West who collected manuscripts in the Turkic language from Turkestan, from Central Asia. But the story is not about Central Asia rulers, but it's about Delhi Sultanate, about what was going on in Hindustan and India, but in the Turkic language, which is quite common, quite rare, and I think deserves to be reproduced and examined in further studies. South and Southeast Asian studies and practicing Malay. We know that a few people were interested in Southeast Asian materials before Erpenius, but he demonstrated on manuscript GG 640 that he practiced Malay in Javi using Arabic Persian script. So these are distinguished things, and I think all of them is because of Erpenius's passion and interest in geography, philosophy, and Sufism. He had a very broad knowledge about all these things and wanted to find a connection between these elements. Let's go and talk about a few of rare materials. So first one is DD 238, a royal copy, copied in Baghdad, but was part of the collection of Abu Ishaq Mahmud Shah, the ruler of the Inju dynasty, who had control over central Persia, Isfahan, Shiraz, and it was part of that collection. And it's interesting. I compared this other copies of this manuscript, which is Sihah fil Lugha, correcting and healing the Arabic language, which are kept in other libraries. And I think this one is one of the most beautiful, without error, infallible. The next item, كتاب العوامل في النحو, a very important book about Arabic language and Arabic grammar. At that time, whoever wanted to become well-equipped with the knowledge of Arabic, they had to refer to a number of books. One of them was this one, that Erpenius, according to data and information that we have, he received it from Hubert and Casabon. The other one is this, GG 529, the book of Al-Mughni fi al-Tababa, which is a book of medicine. And what you see, this is important, and this is beautifully described, that it divides or clearly talk about different types of illness, and it divides into three categories: al-marad, al-sabab, al-arad. So what type of illness or disease, what was the reason, and then what are symptoms? And then the important part of this book, which was produced during the Abbasid period, was at-tadbir, means prescription, finding the way, a remedy for healing disease. And then we have MM415. Edward Brown wrote about this one in 1894, a more than 100-page article about this commentary on the Quran, which was later known as Tafsir Cambridge, which many people, or I know a good number of scholars, wrote about it in Iran, and different Persian-speaking communities wrote about this one, and its contribution to the earliest prose texts we have in the world. This is one of the earliest prose texts in Persian. And the other one is كتاب الأزهار في جواهر الأحجار وفيه السر الأسرار في الجواهر والأحجار. So this book is on gemstones and qualities of stones and gemstones. Of course, at that time, other people showed interest. In Europe also, people wrote about this theme or topic. But Erpenius left his inscription on the folio, on the folio that you see, and this place that you see, Min Kutub Thomas Erpenius. He clearly tells us that he was in the possession of a number of books, and Min Kutub Thomas Erpenius means this is one of the books belonging to Thomas Erpenius. This is only one of the rare global manuscripts, a good number of the rare global manuscripts belonging to Erpenius. What about Southeast Asian materials? Look at this one. This is a GG 640, the third treatise, the first Malay translation of a Persian work, Akhlaq-e Mohseni, belonging to the Persian polymath and prolific thinker, Wa'iz Kashafi, in the early modern Persia, who wrote as a mirror for princes, telling princes and rulers how to treat people and vice versa, how they should be treated. So all these, all these that you see are in Malay. And suddenly in the middle of the Malay text, we have Bait. نزد خیرت شاهی و پیغمبری چون دو نگینه یک انگشتری. In the presence of intellect, both king and prophet are as equal as the gem of a ring. And then in Malay, يعني bahwa pada orang yang, and then continue dua, and then pada suatu cincin adanya setelah nyala adanya bahwa akan raja itu pada martabat Nabi makan maka. So this is the story of, the early story of Malay manuscripts that you cannot find other copies in the world. As far as we know, the sources tell us that there are only one belong to Erpenius. So this is the direct Persian Malay translation of a Persian source belonging to Wa'iz Kashafi. The next one is this one, DD 382. This manuscript remained unknown and widely known as Arabic text, and nobody really paid attention to. Even Edward Brown limited himself to a few lines. While I opened this manuscript, I came across that, okay, the first line, it says, Empat pulokali aziz, Empat pulokali muqtadir, Empat pulokali ya qahar. So this is the point. it says it is clearly a Sufi text from the early period of Islam in the Malay-Indonesian world, telling you that repeat holy names or God's attributions for 40 times. The other manuscript, DD 537, the left side of the screen, for a long time known as a Turkish manuscript. This is what you see, Historia Josefi Turkique. Later on, they realized that this is a Malay manuscript. This manuscript was copied by a Dutch merchant and trader and traveler, Van Albink. Later chose a British name, Peter Floris. He copied this manuscript in Aceh, northern Sumatra, in 1604. And so the first line says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa bihi nasta'in billah. هذا قصة يوسف بن يعقوب عليه السلام daripada kata segala ulama dan hukama. And then this is the combination of Arabic and Malay. But when I went through that one, I realized that in contrast to former literature, this manuscript is actually the Malay translation of a Persian commentary on the Quran about chapter of Joseph, Prophet Joseph. And we don't have any other copies of this one. Other hikayat of the stories about Joseph in Malay are different from this version. Another manuscript is this one, Hikayat Muhammad Hanafiya. This story about the grandsons of Prophet Muhammad and their half-brother Muhammad Hanafiya. So this is very important manuscript, shaping the identity of Malay Muslim literature. And the last item in the Malay-Indonesian world I want to introduce is this one, II 645. Professor Peter Riddle, a distinguished Arabist, linguist, and expert of Malay-Indonesian literature, introduced this manuscript since 1980s, and then transcribed, Romanized, and translated this manuscript in 2017, published with Brill. And he introduced to us that this is the only and the first known Malay commentary on the Quran covering chapter 18. So what you see here is a collection of very rare manuscripts. And my proposal is that at that time, we know that in 17th century, Nuruddin al-Raniri, one of the most important scholars of Islam in Aceh, Indonesia, collected manuscripts that he found them heretical and burned them in Aceh. And the theme of the manuscript that he talked about or he disagreed with are more or less similar to these items. And this is perhaps explains a lot why we only have one copy of these manuscripts in the world. Thanks to Erpenius or the merchants Van Albink, they are now in the possession of Cambridge University Library. What about the first-hand materials about Orientalist studies in Europe? As I said, Turkish literature before Erpenius more or less was limited to dictionaries. Of course, there were scholars familiar with Turkish literature, but systematic treatment of this topic was very, we have very, scarce information about. But this one is Tarikh al-Tabari, History of al-Tabari. And Erpenius, once he wanted to study the Quran, according to his copy, which is kept in Oxford, under chapter 96, Surah Al-Alaq, one can see that he annotated that about the occasion of the revelation of the chapter 96, that he referred to the name of Abu Ja'far, means that he studied Tarikh al-Tabari when he was, or when he studied the Quran. Another manuscript is about the saints of Alexandria, and also which is followed by the history of Muslim Sicily, which I think quite important and unique source. I know that recently there were some studies on Muslim Sicily and Sicily Emirate, but as far as I checked, they were not aware of this manuscript belonging to Erpenius, which are quite important. Many scholars in the 19th century talk about its importance during their exchange of letters in Cambridge. And this one, the Persian text on grammar and dictionary, Persian with Turkish interlinear text with Erpenius's Latin text and annotations. So Erpenius is show us, and the way he studied Turkish sources, history of Muslim Sicily, because he was interested not only about Muslims in the Muslim world. I mean, by Muslim world, I mean the Middle East, South and Southeast Asia. He realized that Muslims move towards the West is very important. And also for Turkish studies, he realized that he can have a better idea about Turkish when he studied the Persian language, the idea which these days is very common too. And the last picture, I mean, the last right side of the screen is a Syriac text, is a poetic Syriac text, mix of Western Syriac and Karshuni, which is a Arabic and Syriac letters. And we know that before Erpenius' collection, Cambridge was not in a position of any single Syriac source or materials. So these sources tell us that Erpenius' manuscript give us more information about the way Europeans have started to study different sources in different languages. And about the last phase of his life, he started to reproduce Oriental texts. When he was in Heidelberg in 1612, he went to Palatina Library and he copied this text that he had a plan to reproduce. And I'm happy to inform you that my forthcoming book after the catalog of Erpenius would be the edition of this text. Taqwim al-Buldan by Abu al-Fida, a 14th century geographer and historian. And he copied this text. Look at his handwriting. Look at the way he created his table of contents. And he copied this text and he had a plan to reproduce it after but unfortunately, due to this immature death, he couldn't finish the task. He also copied this Arabic source. مثلث القرطب. He wondered why Arabic words can be written similarly, but can also be pronounced differently. He referred to this one, دعوت دعوة بالدعوة. So he says da'wa are commonly found in all of them, but what they are pronounced differently. And he copied this before 1615. Also he copied this one. He knew that before him, Escaliga already introduced that, knowing if someone gonna learn about Muslim language and culture, they need to know about their proverbs, amthal, expressions. And so we copied this one, Erpenius. وبعد فهذا أمثال جارية على لسان الناس. I mean, common proverbs and expressions. So he copied this Arabic text himself. So he started to reproduce Oriental texts along with collecting and studying different sources. But also, he had a plan to produce a critical interpretation of Holy Scriptures. We know that, according to what he said in 1620, he listed the works that he wanted to complete. One of them was his critical interpretation of the Quran along with the Bible. This is a theme or a subject which these days is very common and popular, but he had this plan in 1620 to complete it. But we know that this copy of the book, what you see on the right side of the screen, includes his only available translation of the Quran, which was printed and covered only chapter 1, Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran. So this is his life, divided into 3 phases. Let's talk about the last slide. It's about the richness of Erpenius's collection and further research opportunities. So as I said, the diversity and unity, language and context are really important. Rarity and uniqueness. Some manuscripts are rare and some are unique that deserve to be examined seriously. The manuscripts from Arsikat, the city which was ruined after the devastating earthquake in 1620, are now in the possession of Erpenius. About the materiality, the paper, bindings, have their own story and importance. Muslim intellectual history, Southeast Asian heritage, filling a huge gap in Muslim literature. We had no idea, to be honest, what sort of manuscripts were produced along with each other, in the 16th and 17th century Malay world. But such sources, once we put them alongside each other, give us some clues about the significance of Islam or circulation of Muslim teachings in the Malay-Indonesian world during this formative period of Islam in Southeast Asia. The idea of provenance. Who were the owners of the manuscripts before Erpenius? Scaliger, Casabon, Wilmot, Hubert, who? This is the important things. And you come across that plenty of people from the Muslim world were in the possession of such manuscripts. Also, it gives us a clue, it gives us further information and help us to revisit the history of Orientalism as an intellectual trend. Orientalism before the 19th century colonialism was very much different from the colonial Orientalism after the 19th century. And he also talked about multiple Orientalism. It tells us that a generation of scholars had passion to study about or study Oriental languages. Scaliger, Wilmot, Casabon, Hubert, Bethel, Erpenius, all their works were later studied by next generation of scholars. Abraham of Willock, the first chair of Arabic studies in Cambridge, he went through most of the manuscripts of Erpenius and holds some of them until his death. Edward Brown produced some manuscripts. Robert Bensley was passionate about his Syriac text. Palmer was interested in his Arabic grammar. So these are the story of Erpenius. And for sure, not only these works are good, and every single manuscript deserves to be a part of or a topic or subject for PhD and postdoc project, but also they can be a specific title for projects. Every single manuscript with its code can be a title for a PhD or postdoc project, and I think deserve to be examined because they've been hidden for 400 years, although there were some information, but they were generally hidden for 400 years. Now they are available, and I think deserve to be examined. These are the references that I would recommend you to have a look, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Majid. That was really, really interesting. We've got some time for some Q&A, some questions. So if people have got questions, please just do stick them in the Q&A function on Zoom, and I can pass them on to Majid live. And until people have got some questions, I mean, there's a couple of things that I was really interested in what you said, and kind of would like you to talk a bit more about if possible. One is this relationship between Erpenius and Islam, and in particular, we know in the collection, indeed on display in the exhibition, are some works by Persian Sufi poets, including Rumi, most famous certainly in the Western world. And I was wondering, how do we know how Erpenius kind of viewed those Sufi poets, kind of in his work? Did he write about that? Did he articulate it at all?
Thank you very much, Chris. It has been debated among the scholars whether he was interested in Sufism. So there have, limited access to his materials and his manuscripts. So once you go through his manuscript, you come across that he paid particular attention to Rumi's work, because we have commentaries on Rumi's work which were produced in Central Asia. And he, annotated some part of the manuscript. Moreover, once we go through the sources, we can see that Erpenius wrote Sufi poems himself. He was very much interested in Sufism, and he practiced Sufi texts and invocations. And we have evidence in some manuscript, which I mentioned in the catalog. But also, this is apart from Rumi, he collected other Sufi sources, and he was about to find a relationship between Sufism, philosophy, history, and he saw all of them interconnected. He could not really separate them from each other. And Rumi was one of those that he realized that, okay, Muslim before a long time ago, Muslims started to interpret his works, and He realized the importance of. So the point is that, yes, he was very much interested in Sufism because he noticed the influence and the way Sufism is traveled around through the borders, not only in Ottoman Turkish, which they had influence on Europe at that time, but also he knew about the people visiting the Middle East and coming back, and he learned about the importance of Sufism. Yeah.
One of the other things that I was wondering about was, we know you've articulated really beautifully in the exhibition how he learned Arabic. He was encouraged to go around Europe and extend his knowledge of the language, and he did so with other scholars in Europe and native Arabic speakers. But I was wondering about how he learned other languages. So we know, I think you mentioned Syriac, you mentioned Persian. Presumably, was he an established academic scholar in Leiden by the stage that he was learning these languages, or did he also pick them up at the same time as Arabic?
So we know that Semitic languages, including Hebrew, Aramaic, as well as Syriac, he was quite well before leaving Leiden, moving towards England. But once he moved he studied these Semitic languages when he was in Leiden. But when he was in Venice, he had a chance to study other Oriental languages. And this is interesting because when I checked his early printed volumes, I noticed that he was introduced as not only as a professor of Arabic and Oriental languages, but also as a professor of Arabic, Persian, and Oriental languages. But we know that apart from Arabic and Persian, he knew and he learned Turkish when he was in Venice because there were some merchants and visitors, and improved his Hebrew. Further, he learned Malay after 1615 when he received a good number of manuscripts from the Malay-Indonesian world. Yeah.
We've got some questions coming in. One is, how long is the exhibition on? It's on until the 22nd of February, and Fran will put the information in the chat before we finish. And then another question is, where and how did Erpenius die?
Where? Okay.
Yeah.
He was in Den Haag. He was in Den Haag or Hague at that time, and he died because of plague, contagious disease. At that time, he died at the age of 40 in 13th November 1624, and he had between 6 to 7 children, and I think only 3 of them survived him. Yeah.
We've got a question which I don't know whether you. How did CUL acquire the manuscripts, Majid?
Where, Cambridge?
Yeah.
This is very a very good question.
Got a couple of other questions, so the brief version, people will have to come to the exhibition.
Yes, this is correct. This is a very good question. Yeah. Erpenius died. The collection was a big bang, so many people knew about his death. The Duke of Buckingham, George Villiers, was at that time in Hague, and he sent his officers check the library. So the Vido received some offer from the university library. The printed volumes sold in auction. The printer was sent to Elsevier, but the manuscript was sold to Duke of Buckingham after negotiations. Duke of Buckingham offered £100 more than her offer. It was given to the George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham. Duke of Buckingham was assassinated in 1628. They were given to the widow of Duke of Buckingham. In the meantime, the widow of Duke of Buckingham, Catherine, was received offers and some tempting or encouraging messages from William Bedwell and other scholars of Cambridge, and Adams also. And finally, in June 1632, she officially donated the whole manuscript, Erpenius manuscript, to Cambridge University Library. But the story is much more interesting and beautiful. And in the book that you see on the screen, you would see, or if you visit the library, the exhibition, you can see the whole story of what has happened. Yeah.
There's a really Majid's done a wonderful job of articulating just how the collection came to the UL, and it's been here, as he says, for 400 years. One of the fascinating things about when Majid started on this program was I'd have thought all the manuscripts were already ancient by the time they came to the UL, but actually some of them were quite modern, and they've kind of just the institution itself and the manuscripts have grown old together. We've got another question. This is quite a specific one, Majid. Erpenius is
Sure.
Kitabu al-Amthal. Sorry about my pronunciation.
Yes, Kitab al-Amthal, yes.
There we are. Originally based on Scaliger's work, and Erpenius edited it with Ahmed Kazim al-Hajari. Is the proverb manuscript in the exhibition related to this process or the book itself?
No, this is a very good question. The Kitab al-Amthal by Scaliger was later edited by Erpenius. And also you can find the comments by Casabon inside this book, Kitab al-Amthal. And the point is that the manuscript, the last slide that I showed, that manuscript copied by Erpenius, as far as I check, most of the proverbs are not that of the one used in Kitab al-Amthal of Scaliger. And most of them. And I think it makes sense because Erpenius wanted also to follow the footsteps of Scaliger. Scaliger told them and taught the people at that time that knowing about Muslim proverbs is really essential. And no, it's not far-fetched that he wanted to produce something. Yeah, as far as I check, is not found in, most of them are not found in the book of Amthal, but for sure there are some commonalities. But I think he has a specific project. If we go through the 1620 list of his forthcoming projects, we can see that he had some plan to produce something like that about the proverbs, languages. Yeah.
Fascinating. What are the we've got time for one more question, I think. Well, we've got two questions, so I'll ask them both. One is, do you think who was the main influences on Erpenius's journey around Europe?
I think got changed from the beginning. He was inspired by a good number of his scholarly developments, or Scaliger, Raphaelenius. So once he returned to Leiden, he published the work of Raphaelenius with the assistance of, he assisted the son of Raphaelenius to publish that one, Scaliger too. So it says that, yeah, he was very much interested in works of Scaliger and Raphaelenius. But I think also further scholars, once he moved to Paris, so Casabon and Hubert, he studied with them. And I think Qasim al-Hajari, the Morisco scholar, for sure he had influence on his life, and he admired him while in his one of his manuscripts. And I think plenty of more scholars, he was aware of them. Former generations, he was very much interested in Latin translations of the Quran from medieval era, and he knew them and he cited their works, or even the works of At-Tabari, Persian work, Arabic work on history of At-Tabari, which he read a lot. Or geography, he talked highly, he spoke highly about the works of geography of Abu al-Fida and Taqwim al-Buldan. I think it's different scholar were on his list of, celebrities. But yes, for sure, Scaliger and Raphaelenius are very important for him, yeah.
And did he write about his travels?
This is a very, very good question. To be honest, I think in some of the manuscript introduction, he talked briefly about this issue. Yes. He says in one of the manuscript, and I transcribe it in Latin, and my Latin was checked nicely by Susan and James, and then we translated into English. That he says about the story of when copies of the Quran found in Europe, and but very briefly, we don't have any longer story. Perhaps should have been somewhere that I couldn't find. But the work of Vussius and Scriberius, two people who talk about Erpenius after his death in Leiden. They collected a manuscript, compiled a work, and they describe one of the first works about the death and his life, his background, his visit, 3 times visit of UK, all are found in the works of Vussius. Yeah.
Uh, Amazing. We've run out of time, so I'll just say thank you very much, Majid, for a really amazing talk and to bring more life to this remarkable collection, which, as you said, has been in the UL for over 400 years and sort of periodically looked at by scholars. And you've kind of produced this incredible piece of work, not just the exhibition, but the forthcoming catalogue and all the kind of all the research that'll kind of happen now because of your work is really wonderful. For people, if you are in Cambridge, please do come to the exhibition. It's completely free. Booking is required, and as I said, Fran's put a link in the chat, but we'll send the link out again tomorrow. Do look on our website for other events coming up linked to the exhibition, including Professor Josephine Quinn, who is talking about her new book, How the World Made the West, a 4,000-Year History. And I think that'll be booking from December. And also do sign up to our e-newsletter so you can find out what else is happening at the University Library. Again, thank you so much for coming to talk to us, Majid, all the way from Japan, in the evening there in Japan. It was really wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good to see everyone here.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Thank you.